What the city is talking about.
The news that impacts you.
Welcome to the Montreal Now podcast.
Florence Ryan is a regional media advisor for the Montreal area at Elections Canada, and she is on the line. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you, Sharon, to have me on the show.
So let's get to a couple of the issues here. First of all, I've already talked to a couple of people today saying they've already voted, so you've had that opportunity to do that. With respect to before April 28th, and I know there's early voting here, what do people need to know?
Yeah, so there's various ways people can vote. So finishing today was Vote on Campus, where people could go on various campuses throughout the city and vote by special ballot. So that's ending today. They can also go vote on Election Day. There's advance polling, which is happening from Friday till Monday during the Easter weekend. And if none of these options work for people, they can also request to vote by mail or vote at an Election Canada office. But they do have to submit their request by April 22nd.
And you would submit that request via mail or via email? How would you do that?
Yeah, so you would go on our website, election.ca, to submit that request, or go directly in person in an Election Canada office. So
with respect, and I wasn't aware about the campus situation, which you say ends today, do you have to be a student to be able to do that?
No, so this program was originally intended to remove access barriers for students that are super busy, obviously, and to bring the polling station directly to their campus. But any eligible voter can actually vote on campus as long as you bring pieces of ID that show where you live and who you are.
All right, so can you qualify what passes for ID? What would you need to bring with you regardless of when you vote? Pieces of ID. So as I said, must prove who you are. So have your name and a picture and where you live. So just to make sure that you're voting for the right riding. So the easiest one is your driver's license because it has both. But there's a long list of approved ID available on our website. For example, your voter information card can qualify as an ID to prove where you live. So people have a long list that they can go check out. So just make sure to consult that list before you go vote so that you have your approved ID when you go vote. Now, do you absolutely have to show your voter card that you received in the mail?
No. So I know this has been a concern for people that didn't receive their voter information card yet, but don't worry. You do not need to have it when you go vote. It can be used as a proof of ID, but again, if you have, for example, a utility bill with your address on it and your name, that's a proof of ID. So there's a lot of approved pieces of ID that you can bring. So
you can use it, but it's not mandatory, so that's good. If you don't have that card, can you still call and want to get one? Is that still doable?
You can register online as a voter until April 22nd.
Okay.
So most of the voter information card has been mailed out. But if you haven't registered, you can always do it when you go vote. So that's not an issue. Okay.
Now, with respect to, because this is happening, the vote itself on a Monday, if people are waiting to vote then, what's the deal with how much time off you get to vote?
Yeah. So by law, you must have 3 consecutive hours to cast your vote. So if your working hours do not allow to have those 3 consecutive hours, your employer must give you time off. So this is a conversation you need to have with your employer.
All right. Well, let's say, for example, you work a 9-to-5 job and you want to go vote on Monday on the 28th. You go your lunch hour. Does that count? And you wouldn't have to be back until after 3 o'clock. Is that how that works?
Yeah. So it's up to your employer to choose when they give you that 3 hours. So again, you must have that conversation with your employer to make sure that you have those 3 hours to go vote.
3 consecutive hours to allow you to go vote from your employer. Are you allowed to bring kids or other family members with you?
So for kids, you're welcome to bring your kids. We just want to make sure that the secrecy of the vote is kept. So make sure that if you bring your kids, that they are aware that they cannot share who you're voting for. So just something to keep in mind.
Oh, okay. In case they yell out who you're voting for when you're in the booth. Okay. So beyond that, we covered what you need to bring as ID. You don't necessarily need your voter registration card. If you have it, that's fine. 3 hours off, consecutive hours off from work is what you need to be provided with. Anything else that we didn't cover that we should mention or you should mention?
We just recommend voters to make a plan. So make sure that you choose the option that best suits your need. If you have time this weekend and you think you're off on Monday or Friday and you have an extra 10, 15 minutes to spare, go out and vote. It's a super easy process, and we do expect less waiting lines during the advanced polling days, so this is a great time to go vote.
All right, and last thing for people who want to get more information or didn't catch everything, if they just go onto the elections.ca website, it's all there.
Yes, exactly. Our website has loads of information on the process, the ways to vote, and the list of polling stations as well.
Okay. Thank you so much, Florence. Appreciate the time.
Bringing you the breaking news and the people making it. Montreal Now with Aaron Rand. CJAD 800.
Look, I'm pretty sure we talked about this story, but I see it coming up over and over. Which kind of begs the question, typically when things keep coming up over and over, there must be some validity to it, something to it. So who better to talk about this than Dr. Chris Labos, cardiologist with a degree in epidemiology, who's joined us regularly here on CJD 800. By the way, you can catch him on his own every Sunday on weekends with Joanne Vracas here on CJD, so you might want to check that out as well. So, Chris, the deal today, as I said, I believe we once touched upon this, MRI body, or let's call them body MRI scans. So people know about MRIs. Typically, you get it for a particular injury you have. You want to know how serious it is. This idea of a complete body MRI, first of all, where did this come from? Do you know?
Well, it came from some private clinics a few years back, and it gained popularity because a lot of celebrities sort of jumped on the bandwagon. And I mean, it's a very lucrative thing to do, especially if you're running a private business. But from the purely medical scientific standpoint, they really have no value. And there's been this perpetual, maybe battle is too strong a word, but you see it in these private clinics offering and marketing these tests that, they go after people who have insurance because, the insurance companies will pay for them. But they are very expensive tests that frankly have no value. And are potentially even harmful in certain circumstances. And you have this sort of cyclical nature to this story where they sort of ebb and flow in popularity. And every so often a celebrity will say something and it'll become part of the news again. And this is what happens. But yeah, they've been sort of grumbling along for maybe about a decade now when they became popular. They were first called executive physicals. And the way these private clinics would sort of market them, they would go to all these Fortune 500 companies and say, hey, bring your executives down and we'll run them through the MRI machines. And the companies were like, hey, great, it'll make everybody feel better. But of course, very, very expensive.
Well, so let me go through a couple of those points. Number one, I was not aware insurance will cover this in the U.S., I guess, right? Is that the same issue here, or does it depend on the kind of insurance you have?
I mean, it kind of depends on the type of insurance you have, but because most insurance companies, the way most policies are written, they'll say, look, if you have a doctor who prescribes a scan, they're not always going to get into the nitty-gritty of is the scan, necessary or not, because MRIs are, obviously very valid medical pieces of technology that we use all the time. So if you have a doctor who orders an MRI or there's a requisition that says do an MRI, they will do the MRI, and most insurance companies probably will cover it.
So now I'm looking at, I don't know if you saw the story, the one that's in Time, and I think the headline says it all, as you alluded to, right? A full body MRI scan could save your life or ruin it. Yeah. So where's the downside here?
Well, the downside is, here's the thing. You do a scan like this, they're going to see a nodule, they're going to see something. It's all the follow-up that comes after that. So you're perfectly fine. You have no symptoms. You do the MRI scan, they tell you that you have a cyst on your kidney. And you say, okay, and then you go for a biopsy, and the biopsy is inconclusive, so they send you for surgery. And I mean, the story that you had sent me about the guy in Time magazine, he was an ER doctor. He does this. They find a cyst on his kidney. He gets all freaked out, and he says, take it out. He goes there, and because they can't remove just the cyst, while he's under anesthesia, they take out his entire kidney. This guy lost the kidney because of an MRI scan that he didn't need. So the downside is, I mean, that's an extreme example, but the downside is first of all, it costs money. Second of all, you're going to get all these unnecessary tests. And eventually, if you do enough unnecessary tests, unnecessary procedures, eventually you will get a complication like losing a kidney that was perfectly fine and healthy.
You know, in that particular case, I mean, just because there's a cyst there, in and of itself, that is not reason to panic, is it?
No, it's not. And I mean, that's the thing. All of us have, look, when you're young, you're biologically flawless, right? When you do scans on young people, they come back completely normal, and it's beautiful to behold. It's almost a work of art. But as we get older, all the little dings and, accumulated insults of life start to show up. So you see plaques here, cysts there, nodules there. Most of them are clinically insignificant. And that's the problem, is that you do these scans, you end up finding all these what are called incidentalomas, because they are that's actually a joke. They are incidental findings that don't actually mean anything. And that's the problem, because what happens, you go to these private clinics, you pay to do the scan, and then what do? They ship you back into the public system that then has to eat up all of its resources, essentially undoing all the anxiety that was caused to you by the scan that you didn't need, which showed equivocal findings that are not clinically significant.
Yeah, what's that term you use? That's a great term. Insignificant nomas?
Incidentalomas.
Incidentalomas. That's great. The other thing it does point out here, just because, you're doing an MRI, and we realize that MRIs are very good in certain cases, not necessarily for everything. Like if you have an organ that you mentioned, for example, kidney, if you have a liver issue or you have a gallbladder issue, maybe smaller stuff can be spotted, but bigger stuff, not always.
Well, right, and that's the thing. It's always a question of what are you looking for? Because here's the thing. People have this idea that it's sort of like Star Trek, right? You go through the scanner and then the machine will just tell you what's there. Mm-hmm. Obviously a lot of it's done with computers now, but people actually have to go and measure things. They have to look for things. So when you get this information overload, which is a scan from head to foot, people have checklists, right? They know what they're doing, but you can't look at everything simultaneously. So yeah, you can miss stuff. And also, not every scan is the ideal scan for the particular problem you have.
Right.
So if you go into this thinking, I want to find out if I have heart disease, yeah, the MRI is going to tell you if you have a structural abnormality of your heart, if your heart is the right size and all that. But frankly, I could have told you that by doing a simple ultrasound, which is a lot faster and cheaper. If you wanted to know if you have a blocked artery, you would have been better off doing a stress test. So MRIs are not the be-all and end-all scan for every conceivable situation either. And that's the problem. I think it lulls people into a false sense of security, because you could have a normal MRI scan, but if nobody bothered to do blood tests to find out if you're diabetic, right, you could be walking around with a high blood sugar that's not being treated.
I would just ask one last thing as we wrap up here. If you're going in with an injury, for example, right? Like I have a shoulder issue and I want to know what it is because it hurts, it doesn't go away. I've had a preliminary examination by, a doctor or whoever, an orthopedic surgeon. And I don't get an answer there with respect to, well, this is not life-threatening or there's nothing you can do, whatever. Am I wasting money to then go for an MRI? That's kind of what you're saying, to look for a more serious problem that was originally diagnosed as not a big problem?
Well, here's the thing. If you go in for an MRI of your shoulder specifically to find out if you have a rotator cuff injury, then that's one thing. These things they just shove you into the machine and they scan you head to foot for no reason, right? You walk into this exam perfectly fine saying, I want a checkup. And rather than going to a doctor who's going to measure your blood pressure, they just run you into the machine. So that's the real issue here. If you go for a focused scan for a specific reason, then that's fine. We can debate whether you actually need an MRI for your shoulder or not. But it's one thing to do a scan for a specific reason. It's another thing to get a full body scan just as a quote-unquote checkup.
Yeah, and of course, obviously, there's anxiety built into this, right? You come back with something you weren't expecting to get, that just be even almost as bad.
Yes, exactly. And then it's, a year doing other tests in the hospital system, which just eat up your time for no reason.
Always a pleasure. Chris, thank you so much. I appreciate the time.
My pleasure. You take care.
You bet. Dr. Chris Labos, you can check him out. He's here Sundays with Joanne Vrakis. Look, if you got nothing but money, even if you did, based on what he said, do you really want to go ahead and do that if you don't have a problem? Are you looking for a problem? Don't quite understand that.
The very latest news, reported and discussed. Welcome back to Montreal Now on CJAD 800.
All right, let's check in with Dr. Joe Schwarz, as we do every Tuesday afternoon. He is host of the Dr. Joe Show, which airs here Sundays at 3 on CJAD 800. He's also director of the McGill Office for Science and Society. So, Joe, going through the list today, I came across this, and I have no idea what this is, so I'm going to take a wild guess, and obviously I'm pretty sure I'll be wrong. So your first item that we're going to talk about today is something called chlorinated chicken. So I'm going to guess that's what they do with chicken when they're mass processing it as a bath or something. Am I close?
That's right. That's right.
Okay.
And this issue first came up during COVID when Europeans refused to import any chicken that was produced in the U.S. because they said they were bathing them in chlorine and that this was toxic. Well, actually, this was rarely done. Only about 5% of chickens produced in the U.S. were treated in a chlorine bath. Not that really was a problem. I mean, we put chlorine into our drinking water, and that's not a problem. It's a disinfecting agent. But I think that the reason really the Europeans were opposed to this, although they were using the chlorination just as sort of as an out, is that they think that the Americans don't take sufficient care in producing their chickens, that they're produced in these gigantic chicken houses with inadequate hygiene. And whereas in Europe, they pay more attention to the way that chickens are raised. But anyway, the reason that this came up now is because Trump got into this. And he's griping about Europeans not buying American chicken.
Right.
And he wants them to buy American chicken. Well, I mean, there's nothing really wrong with American chicken, but all chicken should be cooked properly. No matter what you do to chicken, there's always some contamination from Campylobacter or Salmonella bacteria. So you have to make sure that, you cook the chicken properly and, at least 165 Fahrenheit. That's the recommended amount. And there's one other thing that should be mentioned with chicken. It's not a good idea to wash the chicken in your sink because what you're doing...
Where else would you wash a chicken?
What?
In the bathtub? Where are you going to wash a chicken?
No, in the sink.
No, but you said it's a bad idea to wash it in the sink.
Bad idea to wash it anywhere. Because what you're doing is splashing water onto the chicken, and the bacteria are on the surface of the chicken, so you contaminate your kitchen counter with the bacteria.
Oh, I see. Okay.
And you're not going to end up disinfecting that counter. Whereas if the bacteria stay on the chicken, you're going to be cooking the chicken. And that, of course, will get rid of the bacteria.
So does cooking the chicken, does that automatically get rid of the bacteria? Obviously at a certain temperature for a certain time.
Yes, it does.
Okay.
Chicken has to be properly cooked. You obviously never order chicken medium or rare.
Right.
Save that for steaks. But anyway, this business of worrying about the chlorinated chicken is nonsense because, first of all, that is a technology that is hardly ever used. If there's any bathing of the chicken in industry, it's done basically with hydrogen peroxide and vinegar, which is a very effective way of getting rid of bacteria. But the Europeans are just using this as an excuse not to import cheaper American chicken. And Trump is getting into it. Trump is getting into everything.
Yeah, well, that's true.
I just came across this thing last night about the shower heads. Did you hear about that?
Yeah, that was last week. The executive order for free-flow shower heads, yeah.
Yes, but what was really stunning was the explanation that he gave. He said, this literally, at least this was the quote, my beautiful hair needs a strong shower head.
Yeah. Look, he talked about it. He talked about shower heads and water flow even before he became president. For whatever reason, he's got to hang up on that. But yeah.
Well, he wants to, I guess, make sure that his hair comes out fine. And it's unbelievable that the U.S. president is talking about how to wash.
A lot of
hair.
things are unbelievable out of him, Joe. It's just to be fair.
It is true.
So wait, I just want to clarify here for people. Everybody's been washing chicken thinking that's a good thing to do. Stop doing that. You're spreading the whatever on the chicken onto your counter, and chances are you're not going ahead and spraying down the counter to get rid of it. So that's a good piece of advice off the top.
You got it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Not I ever do it, but it's good advice. And then there's this story. Please don't tell me this is not the case. I thought asparagus was really, really good for you.
It is.
Oh,
it is.
Okay.
I'm just getting, a bit tired of articles coming out every day about specific foods being good for us and others being bad for us. Whereas what we really need to be concentrating on is the overall diet. Because when an article like this comes out, and this one I noticed in the New York Times, all of a sudden, it becomes the latest nutritional miracle. And people think that this is really what they now have to force into their diet. Now, certainly, asparagus is indeed a good vegetable. There are indeed very few poor vegetables. It's a good vegetable because it contains a lot of fiber. It contains a particular kind of fiber called inulin, and this is very good food for bacteria in the colon. Fiber, by definition, is a component of food that we can't absorb. We can't digest it. So it goes through the stomach, goes through the small intestine into the colon, where there are a lot of bacteria that look on that as a delicious morsel. And when they metabolize the fiber, they crank out a number of compounds that are very healthy in terms of the endothelium of the gut, that is the lining of the gut. It makes it healthier. It prevents substances from toxic substances from entering the bloodstream. So yes, asparagus is great. But then, they go on and talk about the fact that it contains two antioxidants, lutein and zeaxanthin, which support eye health and may reduce macular degeneration. Well, this is really overstatement.
Okay.
Because the amount of these nutrients that are there do not have a significant impact on, your overall diet. I mean, if you have worries about macular degeneration, you need to go to an ophthalmologist and do what they tell you to do, not try to treat it with, asparagus.
It's not a miracle anything, just like every other thing we're told.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They do make an interesting point in this New York Times article about asparagus, though, and something that people, I'm sure, think about is the smell in the urine, right? Which, interestingly enough, is genetically determined. Not everyone produces the scent of asparagus in the urine, and furthermore, not everyone smells it. And it's interesting that both of these are genetically controlled. That is, there are some people who, when they eat asparagus, produce the scent in their urine, but cannot smell it. Then there are those who can smell it, but don't produce it. And then there are, of course, those people who...
how could you smell
categories.
it? Oh, I was going to say, how could you smell it if you don't produce it? You mean smell it from other
from
people's
others.
urine?
Yeah.
Who's doing that? I'm just who's walking around smelling?
It's just interesting, that these things are genetically determined.
Yeah.
But if you are a producer, it will show up very, very quickly in your urine. It doesn't take a very long time. Yeah. The other
things you'll learn on this show. Okay.
The other nutrient in asparagus is vitamin K, which of course is important in the clotting system of the body. When you get a cut, that clot forms, and vitamin K is noted for that. So, no, I'm certainly not, against asparagus. I like asparagus, but I just don't like that virtually every day we see some new article come out purporting that this or that food is the miracle that is going to guarantee us overall health and maintain our eyesight and everything else.
Okay.
There's one last question about asparagus, and that is, do you pick it up with your fingers and eat it, or do you use a fork and knife?
Frankly, Joe, I think it's okay both ways. I don't think we have to spend a lot of time on that. You want to cut your asparagus, knock yourself out. You want to eat it like you're eating a carrot. I think that's okay too. Can we agree on that, or?
Yeah.
Okay. Good.
I think we're good on that.
Next week when we do this, I'm going to bring up my new favorite. I'm eating something called red dates now. Do you know about red dates?
Red dates?
Yeah?
No.
Okay, good. Well, you have a week to figure it out and tell me that I'm an idiot for doing that as well. So I look forward to it.
Because you don't want to miss a thing. Montreal Now on CJAD 800.
Time to check in with Chris Dimakos. He's our CJAD legal contributor. Chris, I want to start off with a story. We often talk about, employer-employee situations and who has what rights and what should you do. Then came across this question, which was sent in actually by an employer who turns out hired someone to fill in for someone on mat leave, right? A cover for a period of 18 months, and then says or asks the question, the new person's performance far exceeds the person who left for parental leave. What are the rules about keeping the new person? So let's deal with that. What are those rules, and can you even do that?
Right. And, the rules are in black and white, and they're in legislation. But in practical, what happened in the real world is a lot of gray area, and you gotta make sure that you are sound in your strategy if you want to basically, dance around those rules and make decisions that one might presume to be not in accordance with the law. So I'll give you an example. If someone goes on mat leave, they are entitled to job security and job protection. We have these laws to make sure that if someone wants to take the time to have a child, well, then they're not worried about their job. So it's important for us as a society to have these laws and to have this job security that's there. That being said, the law protects your job and says that you are not to be disciplined or demoted or terminated or have your salary due, whatever consequence to your job conditions. You're not supposed to have any of that if it's because you decided to take some time off and have a baby. So when you take your mat leave, you are entrusted with a lot of job security. That being said, the question comes up, well, what if it's not about the maternity leave? What if it's just purely a question of performance? An employer says, I want this new person to work more so than the existing employee because they just perform better. Well, my advice to the employer would be, you have to tread very carefully because there's a presumption that if this employee who's on mat leave gets fired or terminated, there's a legal presumption that says you did so because they took mat leave. So you got to kind of dig yourself out of that hole from a legal perspective if you're going to have that challenged in court and show to the court this decision was solely based on performance, not based on the fact that the employee took mat leave. It's a very difficult thing to do. And what happens in real life usually is if an employer speaks with their lawyers and says, listen, we want to package this person out, they have a negotiation set. They sit down with the employee and say, hey, listen, here's what's going to happen. We want to help you out of this transition. We want this other employee now because of performance or whatever the case may be. And they come to some sort of financial settlement to have that employee leave, because doing the reverse, which is just terminating them, usually brings on a lawsuit, and the cost associated with that usually exceeds what it would cost just to sit down and negotiate a split.
So the question from this particular employer, at least in this particular case, is, well, what about if the original employee who was on mat leave comes back, they keep her for 6 months or whatever, and then give her notice and she's done. So they've respected her rights. Then she comes back to work and they're going to say, well, we're going to let you go. Is that a way to get around it?
It could be if you can show that they came back, and it all depends on what your reason is going to be. If your reason is performance, well, then you have to have all of the legal ammunition you need to justify performance, which is performance reviews, how they didn't meet expectations, how they had targets that they couldn't meet. They might have made mistakes. So if that's going to be your angle, if it's going to be a performance issue, well, then you need the legal ammo to be able to have it stand up in court if it gets challenged. But again, when you're working with dates that are really close to the mat leave, the closer they are, even if they're outside of that legal presumption play, the closer they are, the harder it is for the employer to establish, hey, it had nothing to do with that. This is a question of performance, and the question usually comes up, why wasn't this the case before they went on mat leave? How come this employee was fine before they went on mat leave? And they'll say, well, we weren't aware of how bad it was until they got replaced. So it's very factual, but again, I always recommend make sure that your strategy is sound, because it can cost a lot of money.
That's quite the issue, isn't it? Having them come back and then having your employer say to you, we had no idea how bad you were until we found someone who was so much better.
Well, not only that, one last thing, it's within the tribunal's right to reintegrate that employee back at her job. So, for example, if they get terminated based on performance, it gets challenged, there's a possibility that employee gets their job back, which sends a message to all of the employees at that company, hey, ownership doesn't have carte blanche here. If they do something that's not legal, you can have it reversed. So, again, my advice to employers, if you want to go that route, make sure your strategy is sound and that you have the legal ammunition to do what you need to do.
Chris, last one real quick. A couple has a child. This is a story about a couple out in B.C. They go to court over the terms of their separation. Boyfriend says, hey, we're living common law where division of assets, not applying. The girlfriend says, wait a sec, we were not a married couple because of the way the boyfriend treated her. So I'm trying to understand, what's the story here?
Yeah, so although we don't have that common law marriage here in Quebec, they were trying to argue that the boyfriend was saying, we're common law, so we get to partition our assets based on what would it be like if we were actually married. And the woman was saying, no, we weren't in a common law relationship. And what the judge used, which was the main factor in determining that they were not common law, even though they lived together and they had a kid together and they paid bills together, it was the text messages that was sent by the boyfriend to the girlfriend, the way he spoke to her and what he called her and the names and the vile text that he sent. The court said that does not seem like someone who's in a relationship, a common law marriage. That seems like someone who has absolutely not wanting nothing to do with the other person. And it was ruled against the boyfriend's case just because of text messages. The lesson here is, remember, if you're full of emotion and you're getting into an argument, I know it's become now the knee-jerk reaction to pick up the phone and vent and write whatever you feel like writing. But it can end up costing you hundreds, if not thousands of dollars, not on legal fees, but in rulings and judgments. So what you write sticks around, and it can be used against you. So think twice before you go on a rant with your significant other on a text message. It can come back to haunt you.
All right. Great news, or great advice as always. Chris, thanks so much.
This has been the Montreal Now podcast.
Listen live on your radio weekday afternoons from 2 to 6
on CJAD 800
or through the iHeartRadio app.